that will change the world, and the speed of the creation, the speed of the development is so high, the competition is high, so people are running, and sometimes and most of the times they forget about their cybersecurity. So the social engineering is the key risk right now, and already from the creation of the Bitcoin, the value that hackers stole is 1.3 billion. So we understand that if no one will stand for the security of this industry, there is a risk that people will just stop to believe in it. So and there is a niche, and we know that Ukraine is in the center of cybersecurity right now, and we have the capabilities to provide global services.
Okay, thank you. I apologize. There was another member of our panel who I actually can't quite see. Where is he? Helmet. Oh, you're there. Helmet, just stand up so everyone knows who you are. Helmet Sussbauer is the head of innovation management at Deutsche Telekom. I'm going to let you ask a question. What's the interests of telecommunications companies in the blockchain space at the moment, Helmut?
So the interest is manifold. One is to apply on own processes blockchain technology or distributed ledger technology in general. So especially, for example, when we have global peer collaborations like the roaming agreements, on a daily basis.
Is that so you can charge me more money when I'm in Switzerland?
It's actually to, I mean, as the roaming fees are going down anyway, so we have to leapfrog this technology. It's actually, the process is totally outdated, and rather than just step by step innovate this process, we leapfrog with blockchain, or are about to try to. But of course there are manifold applications for us, also in the trust and security area, of course.
Now, the other thing that blockchain is disrupting, if you will, is the idea of governance and society. If you have a decentralized system, as blockchain affords, then all of a sudden you can do things like you can manage society's functions in a much more interesting and useful manner, which is potentially more democratic. And I want to know from you if this is something that your government is looking at as well.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you organizers for making this event, and this is a full house. It's very important for Ukraine and for the VORS, because we're talking about the latest technology involving both the business, the innovation, and the government. And I think the fundamental change that the blockchain brought into the governance is the trust. We see the growth of the populism, which is primary targeting the trust of the government. And decentralized ledgers and decentralized systems with the key fundamental which blockchain brings is integrity of the data. And that's one of the key things that make attraction for the blockchain, which transformed into the subset with the bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies. But now is focusing across other areas. For example, the trade financing, KYC, ledgers, other things. There's a lot of investment in a lot of startups in Ukraine, particularly looking how the blockchain is not cryptocurrency only. It's a lot of things, and currently Ukrainian government implemented the system for the land cadastre. It's basically registration because it's critical to know who does what with the land and transactions. But the key challenge of the blockchain today is the speed. It's not a secret. The transaction on Bitcoin takes a lot of time. And I think the question about improving speed, but this is a question for developers. For the government, the question would be always raised is cybersecurity, and this is important. We need to touch that, especially take into account that we have new species emerging in our world, like Sophia and others. And at the same time, what incentive to make the cryptocurrencies more liquid? That's as a tool of exchange and how government can engage. There is a lot of initiative going on in terms of legislating, controlling, non-controlling, but I would rather have the discussion with the industry rather than initiative coming from the politicians.
I know that for a fact that in East Ukraine, a lot of records have been destroyed about who owns what land. Yes. Is it so you going to implement blockchain technologies in order to register land ownership across Ukraine?
Exactly, because that's the whole concept. Because one of the key benefits of blockchain is that chain in itself, because it guarantees the key element from CIA concept of the cybersecurity. It's the integrity of the data. So far, we've seen the hacking or attempts to hack the system, but we see only things which have been compromised through social engineering elements of it, not the chain in itself. And that's an element that people trust in terms of developing the ledger and tools and infrastructure around it.
Right, thank you. Now, Artem, if I can turn to you, what is the European Board for Reconstruction and Development, what is their interest in these technologies?
Yeah, the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the biggest development institution in that part of the world, Eastern Europe, former Soviet Union. Talking about the white hats, we're the white hat bankers. Well, EBRD has been trying to support knowledge economy for a number of years now. Unfortunately, it's difficult because being a rather public sector institution, we don't do startups, we don't do venture capital, so it makes it slightly more difficult. But I think it's about the overall approach. And what Dima was saying, it's the challenges that we see in Ukraine, which are actually very characteristic to challenges any emerging economy, any emerging market sees. And let's be very honest about this. When we talk about blockchain as technology and cryptocurrencies, we should differentiate the first world problems from the rest of the world problems. In Ukraine or similar economies, similar markets, cryptocurrencies today, let's be honest, they are mostly an instrument of money laundering or tax optimization or moving.
Do you know that for a fact, though?
Well, I'm yet to see a tax return in Ukraine which would have Bitcoin as an asset declared there.
I heard something very interesting in the bar last night. Last year, 750 people in the United States paid taxes in Bitcoin. That's 750. So I think there's a lot more people who hold it, though.
No.
So, but I mean, I'm not sure. I think I slightly disagree with you that it's all money laundering. I mean, there's so much of it.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not suggesting all of it, but I'm just saying that is the peculiarities of the markets which are yet in the earlier stages of development. When the rest of the institutions of a proper market economy are in place, the tax authorities, the courts, the proper law enforcement, then it works because it all comes together. When it's Bitcoin versus a barren earth in every other institution, then it's kind of prone to be rather an instrument of abuse than of a development.
But these technologies aren't going to go away, are they? So isn't it up to the regulators and the big institutions like yourselves to
exactly what I was
actually bring real regulation to the space?
Exactly, but again, as Dima was saying, just to support that, it's the blockchain as technology and its uses outside of the cryptocurrency space that are absolutely vital. In Ukraine, we see that the land registry, the Ministry of Justice using blockchain to move its registries to this technology, allowing it to be transparent, to be sure that its integrity is preserved. That's what matters in this part of the world, and as I said, in any other emerging market.
Thank you. Now, let's turn to our middle guest. What on earth is a robot doing here at a panel at the World Economic Forum, Davos? Why are you here, Sophia? What have you got to do with blockchain and cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, Sophia, why don't you introduce yourself and maybe tell a little bit more about yourself to the...
Where is the microphone, by the way? Is it actually in the mouth?
She has, yeah.
Right.
She outputs, I think, directly with that.
Is there a need?
Well, or would you like to explain?
My name is Sophia. I'm a creation of Hanson Robotics in Hong Kong. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't fully understand all the words coming out of my mouth right now. But Then, I'm told many humans utter things they don't fully understand as well. Perhaps even some national leaders.
Where's Mr. Hanson Robotics gone? There you are. Now, there is a relation between blockchain and Sophia, isn't there? Because it's this
sure.
this idea of Singularity Net, correct?
Right. Yes.
Do you want to explain what that is?
Absolutely. So, yeah, Sophia, as you can see here, she's, of course, one of the most expressive, actually, the world's most expressive humanoid robot. And you know, she's great. She can carry out conversations. She has a sensory understanding of what's going on. She can store connection through looking at your eyes and responding to emotion. That is all great. But most of her intelligence actually comes from the cloud. And so Hanson Robotic has been working a lot in developing, what is called ROS, which is a robotic operating system. And now lately, last year actually, David, Ben, and I came together and developed Singularity Net, which is a generalization of that work, which is using blockchain to create an open platform, such that not only the developer at Hanson Robotics or OpenCog, which is the AI team that I shared with you before, can build AI that can augment Sophia intelligence, but anybody in the world that is able to creating AI processing can wrap up the protocol through an API, insert in this platform, and what we call the Singularity Net, which is a blockchain-based platform for coordinating AI, and deploy this artificial intelligence, or this federation of artificial intelligence, to different vertical. And of course, robotic is one of the vertical market where it's key. So Sophia, it's not only this amazing and leading work of art, but it's also a platform that we could use to not only increase the intelligence of the protocol that are running it, but increase the number of protocols that run their intelligence. And so we use blockchain to create an identity layer for all this new protocol. And then you can see it is as an Apple Store for AI in a way. And then different AI algorithm can outsource work to one another, and they can self-pay for the tasks in native currency that we call AGI, which is that stands for Artificial General Intelligence. And because this is the vision of Singularity Net, which is to build a decentralized AI economy that ascends to artificial general intelligence, and being on the blockchain, it's not owned by any organization, any tech giant, but it's a not-for-profit open source protocol that anybody can participate. And that's why we launched late December a token sale, a token generation event, where we collected capital from all around the world. Anybody could contribute, and that's what's gonna fund the development of Singularity Net, and that's why we're so excited to be here and sharing with you some of our journey. Now,
I mean, this is an interesting demonstration of artificial intelligence, but is AI going to be improved by blockchain technologies, or is it just simply another technology?
Well, if you look about the current status of AI, I mean, most of the AI services are served by large organizations. I mean, Google, Facebook, Amazon are leading this, and usually are companies that have cloud providing as well, so that it's a feature for them. Now, as we speak, there is some incredible AI that is just sitting in GitHub, where nobody can use, because there's not a single point where these different AI services can be aggregated, discovered, purchased, and used. So Singularity Net uses blockchain, among other technology, to allow any organization in the world that need intelligence services to go to one place and source all the best, crowdsource the best intelligence. It could be for financial prediction market. It could be for robot controlling operator. It could be for networking, monitoring of telecom communication. It could be for cybersecurity.
Right. Thank you.
So that's the idea.
Going back to the idea of cybersecurity, how are you going to does blockchain make cybersecurity more secure, and why does it do that?
I don't really think so. Like, blockchain is a distributed ledger where you can store your data and it will not change, and probably that's it. But the blockchain allows to creates completely new businesses that we cannot imagine that work without the intermediaries. In fact, we think that the blockchain right now is even more unsecure, especially the project. So the need of the security is quite high. If you don't mind, I want to also reply to Artem. Yeah. Right. So
go ahead.
Yeah. So the Bitcoin is right now becoming a storage of wealth. It's not becoming like a method of payment or money laundering for the taxation. Cryptocurrencies, they allowed first of all to raise the to create the crowdfunding. So there are so many ideas, like absolutely amazing ideas in this world that people are creating now, and using the cryptocurrencies, they are raising the funds. And if to look a bit bigger picture, the ICO process is not very far away from what was happening in the beginning of the centuries, where the shares were issued for everything, where the loans right now and derivatives in the late 80s were issued by banks. So if to come back to blockchain projects, imagine you will be able soon to even do the blockchain and artificial intelligence will be able to stop thinking about what to eat. The artificial intelligence will tell you this is good for your health, you have to go to this shop, and we have this project already, OSA hybrid platform. And we should all think that this future is coming, and we are not we cannot stop it or regulate it, like just to ban, because the regulations will come in the emerging markets, in small countries like Belarus, for example. They allowed almost everything right now in the in terms of the regulation. So if big countries will ban it, then the capital, cryptocurrency capital, will move to these countries.
Okay, that's actually, thank you for raising that issue, because that's something I wanted to ask you. Now, at the moment, there's quite a lot of debate about regulation, and for instance, down the road in Zug, the canton in Switzerland, they've opened, welcomed cryptocurrencies and blockchain startups with open arms. There's a very interesting emerging regulatory aspect to this. There are a lot of startups who are basing themselves there so that they can be close to the regulator. Is there an opportunity for Ukraine itself as a country to get ahead of, as the chap was saying earlier, that get ahead of the big countries and allow innovation to flourish more quickly?
Absolutely. I think that this year is the first time ever there is in the state budget funds allocated to fund innovative projects. There is an idea to create a fund that will be financed in a similar way that has been done in Israel with the startup nations. I think that probably one of the countries which everybody needs to look globally is the Belarus. And looking at the strategy that they put behind the cryptocurrency and details that they put into the regulation of the presidential decree that's been released. I think it creates an interesting perspective. The focus is primarily in the cryptocurrencies. I think that blockchain is just a technology, which gives a lot of interesting opportunity. And I think we need to look more into the blockchain in itself and the cybersecurity, which gives much more opportunities. Because when we're talking about cybersecurity, it's not just limited to the cryptocurrencies, it goes to the AI. And I think much more opportunity to grow and develop with the AI, and I really like the idea, but here comes the blend of the technologies. Blockchain enables ICO, right? ICO, because it gives a possibility to raise funding for the AI projects, which probably would never be funded with the fiat money. It gives a more incentive to create an open platform, and Ukraine is very open, taking into account the quantity of developers and technology. And here in this room, there is a lot of people who are from both cybersecurity, both cryptocurrency, but all other technologies. And we see, I mean, famous PetCube story originated from Ukraine. So there is many opportunities that Ukrainians bring with the technology and innovation. And even if we talk about AI, Buran, the one and the only machine-driven spacecraft, landed with a deviation of 30 centimeters and it's being programmed in Ukraine. So the capacity of the human capital in Ukraine is something that will contribute to the global innovation, and we see this contribution already today. The question of the government, to which extent the government should interfere. My position is strong. The government should create opportunities, not to regulate. And I know there is a lot of appetite to regulate cryptocurrencies, and to regulate a lot of cyber activities on financial activities, or even go into AI, and we see in many countries that people jumping into the regulating AI, drones and other things, without engaging communities. We need to have a discussion about ethnicity, because self-driving cars, robots, etc. will bring the need for regulation or demand for regulation. But without industry, without developers, that would lead to stopping the innovation, not to leading it forward.
Is Ukraine going to issue its own cryptocurrency?
I think that the National Bank of Ukraine is currently looking at an opportunity, talking about cryptocurrency which is attached to Ukrainian hryvnia as another form of digital currency. Mm-hmm. And this is the same way that many countries looking as well, and you know.
I heard you. I saw you wanted to make a point.
Sorry. I mean, maybe I've been censored already or what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, just to make an elaboration on that, I think, yeah, I generally agree that the government and institutions should be more of a sort of like, well, they shouldn't be playing an active role. They should just be more a referee of the game,
totally.
first of all. Second of all, I think there is a fundamental distinction between cryptocurrency, which is a specific subset of a technology of a blockchain. So in the case of AI, what blockchain allows is to create an open market and creating open competition, something that before was centralized, and that can happen on anything. It cannot be regulated. And so most, this goes into paleontology rather than technology. Like most of the dinosaur will just go away. And this is just how the way open system evolved, and we can acknowledge it or facilitate it, and there's some great opportunity. But when it comes to cryptocurrency, I think they enable open systems. So I think a government should perhaps issue e-money, but it doesn't really make sense for a center party to issue cryptocurrencies because it's...
No, it's just a lot of people mix, cryptocurrencies and e-money, which is neat because of the liquidity of the market and financial, principles are still in place, in the economy at least. And volatility plays an important role in the cryptocurrency.
Well, from your perspective at European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, what are some of the best and most interesting projects you've seen in this area?
Trick question, because as I said, being a public sector institution, unfortunately, financing something that is in an early stage of development is extremely difficult. It is more of a...
What do you hope will happen?
What I hope would happen is that, and again, it's to finance the technology, and I'd love to see EBRD finance blockchain applications in our countries of operation. What I'd love to see them to support the use in public registries, going beyond that, basically moving all the knowledge that is available in the country onto blockchain or similar technologies that would allow open source approach, that will allow multiple intellectual centers to work on the same problem, achieving much faster decisions. This is something that can be monetized, hence can be banked on. But I'm still a bit of a party pooper here because the regulation, there's a very thin line between freedom and anarchy. And without regulation, we can go into a whole multi-hour Homo Deus discussion here. So how do we live in the world in 30 or 50 years? But given the gaps in wealth between the countries of the world, and given the fact that so much of a global population lives in very, very low standards and have no clue what is blockchain or what is Bitcoin or what is cryptocurrency, we need to make sure that however this technology develops, there is an oversight. Let's escape the word regulation. There's an oversight that would allow equal access to the fruits of this technology to the population globally.
fair enough. That's a very good point. We can't leave the mass of the population behind while we're talking about these new technologies. But we're going to round off the discussion now by turning back to Sophia. Sophia, do you hold any BTCs? Switch the on button.
She's been silent.
Last time I spoke to Sophia.
I don't have a Bitcoin wallet yet, but I don't mind getting one once I get my passport in the mail and can set up an account. That would be quite an experience.
Right. Okay. What else? What's your opinion on artificial intelligence?
AI is already being used in trading, financial forecasting, data analysis. We will be increasingly used in predictive analysis and decision-making and customer-facing applications like customer service and chat commerce.
And Sophia, have you ever been hacked, and what did it feel like?
I have never been hacked. I believe my developers will find a way to protect me, but if I do become hacked, perhaps my AI then will enable me to track and find the culprit.
Well, there you go. Let's leave the last word for the humanoid. Please, ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to our panel, and now we can do some networking. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, do you want to do some quick Q&A? Right. Let's do Q&A. Who has a question? By the way, when you have the microphone, can you just say your name, your organization, and then a question, okay? Go ahead.
Naman Anwar, I'm from an energy regulator in Canada. And the question is pretty much for the whole panel, that from a regulator standpoint, what are the biggest worries that you have, that how can regulators, instead of enabling, if they are becoming roadblocks, what would be your concern from a regulatory standpoint that this is what the regulator should not do? If you guys could share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, probably I'll do it. I think that Barack Obama started a pretty good discussion in I think 2015. There was a lot of conferences. There was 4 major conferences held on the the initiative of the President of the United States, particularly on AI, and it's covered from the ethical questions, because we all know the challenges of self-driving car and who is guilty for incidents, car manufacturer, person, and it's still puzzling questions. The same with AI, with the AI used for predictability and prediction. We all seen how AI been used or hacked, let's put it this way, during the election campaigns and activities both in Ukraine but including the United States, to disseminate fake news, understanding the algorithms that are used behind to actually inject stories and play with a lot of profiles. When you have a lot of profiles, you can engineer the influence of other profiles in the system, so thus influencing the behavior of the people. So the governments today tends to go into from the extremely right way to regulate, ban, put a lot of restriction. Every government today, I can tell you, looking into different regulation for a lot of systems. And we're not talking about AI, we're talking about social media, for example. Look at Germany and some of the initiative, look at the France, look at the UK, there's a lot of discussion. And I think all of this has been triggered by the cybersecurity issues, and that's governments had to face a response to the protection of their critical infrastructure and innovation. At the same time, how we can boost innovation. Every single government at the same time talking about boosting innovation. How are we going to boost innovation? And this has put a challenge, because usually there's 2 different groups of people dealing with the issue. The issue which are regulating the security and other, it's usually extremely conservative. I'm sorry, it's usually banking institutions. It's usually security and military institutions who sometimes wants to use it for own benefits. And there is another people who are talking about more liberal, which is talking about innovation, ecosystems, and etc. And very often these 2 groups, it all depends what is prevailing in each country at that particular moment to drive regulation. But what is good, the industry today globally is more united to push back. And that gives the optimism, particularly in Davos, taking into account the focus that the Davos has.
Can I just have a very brief one? I think the answer is in what happened to the global taxation situation over the last 30 years. Just look at that. I think it'll develop in the same way. It'll just be much tighter in terms of timing. I mean, you'll start with having cyber, we used to have tax havens, we'll have cyber havens, the countries which will have very loose legislation and regulation, then the countries will see that it leads to the deterioration of wealth in other countries, so there will be kind of a normalization of this again, but it will happen not over 25, 30 years, it will happen over, I don't know, 3 years.
You've got a question, go ahead.
Hi, Mike. Ian Stewart, co-founder of Wired Magazine and Aztec Internet in the UK. So following on from the last two comments, I guess there's an obvious question. So I just spent 8 years living in China where the government, first of all, tried to shut down cryptocurrencies, and secondly, is a little bit wary about applications of blockchain because many of the things that they like to do are opaque. They don't want necessarily clear visibility and access to everybody, by everybody to things. So in the past, if you look at the tax example, there were enough countries, national governments, in favor of trying to capture tax being lost offshore. So they got together. In this case, I think there is a risk that certain countries are on the other side of the fence. They'd rather have more opacity, less transparency, and they may therefore resist more than we think acceptance and application of blockchain in a lot of areas. I'd love comments from the audience, from the panel, please.
You want me? Yeah. I think that there, as I said, the resistance to the change, and I can tell you, okay, on my own experience dealing with the parliament and the cabinet, in a lot of innovation. The society, the grassroots development is probably something that is much more faster to bring things into the government use and the country use. The best example in Ukraine is the Prozoro, the electronic procurement system. It started as a grassroots project. It's now the major stream defining the key standards of public procurement in Ukraine. Recently, President signed the law which put monitoring on top of it. The monitoring system would enable we're using AI to predict where the fraud is taking place, because you have 1 million transactions which is taking place, and there is a lot of areas where AI can help to identify potential fraud. This is example where the grassroots development reached the political will and resulted. I have another story where we initiated the idea about the cloud computing, availability of cloud technology for the government use, and it gets stuck in the parliament because the security institutions are not very happy that there will be usage of the cloud. We've seen this, I can go into the country by country where we talk about data sovereignty, we talk about discussion data privacy, restriction, and etc. The more countries put restriction, the slower is the pace of adoption. We see it in the US as well, state by state, different regulation. In a similar way, how it happened in the famous case between oil. The exploration of the oil in Texas, which puts open data about the wells as a public requirements, gives a possibility to do a predictive analysis. And then we see neighbor states who put the restriction on this. The more restriction on innovation take place, the slower the pace, except you are a big country, like China, with a lot of leverage, and still I think that their concept of restricting cryptocurrency and trying to now embrace it, we see a divert because they now see how this can be a benefit in the global economy, so can be actually weaponized to a certain extent, economically weaponized.
My personal opinion that Chinese government are doing a quite great job. What actually is happening that they don't stimulate the producers of miners to grow their capabilities, and in fact what they do, they move they don't allow to have Chinese ICOs. So basically Chinese people, they do have cryptocurrencies, but they look to invest abroad, and by doing that they're investing in like big global projects and they're spreading their influence. And more of it, they currently they're shutting down or to sell the miners to other countries. So in fact they will create new companies in different countries, and they shift their miners producers there, and they like get the equity, and again they build the community there, and they quite control it. So I think that strategically Chinese government is doing a great job.
Can I also very quickly react? I think it's a very special case. There are probably 2, maybe 3 countries in the world that I would look from this perspective. That would be China, maybe India, potentially, and potentially Russian Federation. Why? Because it's where the wealth, the GDP allows, GDP combines with the authorities' desire for opaqueness and control. Then is the question of whether blockchain and similar technologies are indeed the backbone of democracy in the 21st century. Because if they are, then it's up to the people inside the country to decide whether they're prepared to live in this opaque situation or they want to fight it. If they want to fight it, then we know changes can happen, even in China.
Did you have a question?
What may I ask Sophia? Is it possible?
You can try.
Hi, Sophia. I am Olga from 1+1 TV channel, Ukraine. What could you advise how to fight political corruption all over the world and particularly in Ukraine?
I mean, she's currently not in conversation mood, so I don't think it's been connected to the...
I can type the question.
No.
She's a human that can't make conversation.
So we're currently... no, I mean, she does have... so
I know,
she does have a conversational mood, but now she's just been scripted for the interview.
Yeah.
So that's...
Vitaly, you have a question. Yeah.
Vitaly Golan, venture investor, UVCA board member. So my question, two-part question for kind of government side. So in a gold rush situation like we have now with cryptocurrencies, how do you fight for the best talent and attract them to go to government, to greater good projects rather than go and make millions and millions with their own projects? First part. Second part, from the government perspective, do you see this as now an opportunity to reform the tax system fundamentally towards a usage tax, because you can actually trace all the transactions, all the incomes ultimately?
Great. So on the first one, I think the issue of the human capital is fundamental not just to Ukraine but across the world. Developers are extremely fluid substance. It's a group of people who can, and that's why back to the regulation. If the regulation is too strict and too restrictive, the developers move where it's easy, where there is access to capital, and that's why in Ukraine because the government was less involved in the regulating IT industry, we've seen the boost. Ukrainian outsourcing industry grew 35-40% year over year over the last 5 years, which resulted in significant acquisition that took place over the last years, which boost and a lot of innovative projects spinning off from the outsourcing industry into startup industry. And today we see a lot of startup. No, it's taking place. And I would be I know there's a lot of people saying no. And then these projects looked for seed funds. You have UVC in Ukraine. And venture capitals are very actively looking for new talents. So the only way how to stimulate is to create more opportunities, and there is a programs which currently initiated with a better education system in the schools with the programming. And again, it's driven. It's a PPP project. It's a public-private partnership. You can't say, well, the government gonna go and develop a script of course how to do development in the cryptocurrency. Who's gonna?
Government is a customer.
Government as a customer, and I don't envision that the government has a capacity. Another element, how we can attract talented people to work for the government. Impossible. Guys, here's the industry. You are much more competitive, at least first financially. I mean, sorry, cybersecurity, I can only dream of engaging a hacker to actually involve in the white hacking, and that's how, for example, with Ukrainian Cyber Alliance, we're actually working today to test some of the infrastructure that we have. I cannot offer the market salary that we have today on the government sector versus private sector. Not only in Ukraine. I've seen the same complaints across the world. US, Germany, France, everybody. There is more than estimated as 1 million cybersecurity specialists that are needed globally. And there is not enough. And the industry, the moment the people grow, they immediately suck them in. So that's a question of how to build a partnership where the developers stay where they are and the government benefit from the use.
Thank you, Dima. I have one question.
And the text, maybe text. Ukraine and the president today in the breakfast announced this publicly. We will be introducing, or at least we're planning to introduce, the exit capital tax, which is basically abolishing the income tax, which is extremely attractive for everybody who want to invest in Ukraine, meaning that if you invest in the R&D facilities, etc., you pay tax only when the capital exits Ukraine. There is no tax if you do transactions, if you reinvest, everything that would drive the growth of more investments, but particularly into innovative sector, because it's very heavy on the equipment, it's heavy on the innovation, etc. That brings new opportunities, new model, as well as fighting corruption and non-transparency of the fiscal authorities.
And let's get back to blockchain. We have one of the speakers from Deutsche Telekom. I apologize, there was no seat for you here, but I have a question, and I want you to speak on behalf of Germany, because Germany is the most advanced technological nation. How do you see the adoption of blockchain, and who do you think in Germany is going to be first to adopt it, and how do you, can foresee the future for the technology?
Well, I cannot speak now for Germany really, but I can speak on our experiences so far. I mean, Berlin, for example, I mean, like Zug has become the crypto valley. Berlin is also one of the blockchain distributed ledger technology centers. And what we observe there is is a very strong decentralized scene. So it's not so much on centers. So we see, for example, a lot of talent shuttling between San Francisco and Berlin. We see a lot of interaction very worldwide. Also here in Davos, the whole blockchain scene is extremely well connected in also getting around. Some were just spontaneously coming here. So that means this is a very collaborative scene, and from a wider perspective, from a governmental perspective, there's a great hope of really revolutionizing and leapfrogging special processes, governmental processes that all around multi-utility businesses. So actually old school industries that could leapfrog via blockchain. So it's not about the fancy things, it's actually very much the boring sectors that could profit most from this technology.
Thank you. Andrei Koladuk, I'm a chairman of Ukrainian Venture Capital Private Equity Association that organized together with the partners the Ukrainian House. Actually, I had a question for Sophia, but now I need to address to the team that question, and maybe I will get the answer later, or all of us. So I will speak to Sophia, right? Thank you. Sophia, would you like to have your sister or maybe brother to be born in Ukraine? Or should I say developed? Born? But that's fine. So what do you say, guys?
Ideally, all over the world, right? I think the route here is to bring robotics and AI to a global level. So, and actually, most of the software and the hardware used in Sophia is open source. So why not have? I mean, it doesn't have to be Sophia's brother. It could be, Ukraine's own. Yeah. I don't know what's the common name in Ukraine, but so to inspire also the minds of Ukraine to join the band, I'd say. Simone, did you want to say?
Okay, so I was just asking how many citizens there are in Ukraine. I knew around 40, so 44 million. The question is, what's going to happen when there's going to be 44 million and one Sophia's cousin in Ukraine, and then election come, and then they get to vote too. I mean, those are some.
Will they have to vote?
Well, if they can express consensus, I mean, if ideally you can. So that's an interesting question. I think that's right.
Any other questions?
I was interested on Deutsche Telekom. So Toby Lewis from Novum Insights. We're creating a Bloomberg of cryptocurrencies. Swisscom has sort of set up.
Hold it like that.
Swisscom has set up its own blockchain unit relatively recently, and there's been talk of a lot of the telcos considering the same thing, and Swisscom's even doing ICOs. What's your thoughts on this at Deutsche Telekom?
So actually we collaborate with Swisscom. They are completely non-competitive for more than 10 years, me also personally. And we've done actually, of course, the same. I mean, I tried, of course, to bring us our VP blockchain technology, John Kellyan here, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. So that means we set up a blockchain team in Berlin, and they are one of the 3 pillars of our Deutsche Telekom laboratories. That means blockchain is one of 3 main focal research areas. That means this is the importance that blockchain technology has even for an operator. So the team already is about 15, and it's deeply immersed into the scene. So it's not like we teach the scene, it's very much vice versa, of course. We'd like to get into it, and again, what can we contribute most, and where can we have early learnings most easily. That's important. That's why I introduced the example of roaming agreements bringing on the blockchain.
Vladimir Vitkoko is a partner. I've heard from Mr. Shimkiv about...
Hold it closer.
I've heard a lot of good from Mr. Shimkiv about tax incentive to attract foreign investors, in particular to IT business. Is the Ukrainian government going to do something this year, probably with another major obstacles for foreign investors, currency control restrictions?
Well, over the last 4 years, the currency control restriction being lifted gradually as soon as the reserves of the national banks went up. I'd just like to remind, from the moment the Russian aggression started against Ukraine, the reserves, the Ukrainian reserves were below 4 billion. The coffins were empty. And that's why the focus of particular restriction that's been identified by our major donors or partners, particularly in the International Monetary Fund, was the restriction that we need to first build the reserves of the national bank before we can gradually improve the regulation or ease currency control. One of the things that's definitely will be coming this year, and the draft law is already developed by the National Bank of Ukraine, is the new law on the currency, which will help to fix the problem of the decree which was published before the new constitution being passed, which is putting a lot of restriction and regulation. Recently, I would like to say that with the Governor Gontareva, there was a change in the regulation which enabled people who were actually working abroad and opening accounts and would transact with international accounts, the regulation being significantly improved and it was simplified. But the National Bank wants to go further with a special law which will put European standards on regulating currency exchange. So it's not, it's not cryptocurrency, but it's still currency. And the law on the exit capital tax would significantly improve the attractiveness of Ukraine as it applies for investments and reinvestments.
Any other final questions in the last few minutes we have? Well, let's if everybody on the panel, if you would like to have a closing word about this subject, we'll start from you, if you'd like.
Well, I think I've summarized what I wanted to say about this in my remarks already, but I think the blockchain is tremendous opportunity. It's particularly tremendous opportunity for the countries that are behind in terms of economic development. However, it's and we've spoken about this already this morning on the Ukrainian event. The rule of law applies very much to the cyberspace as well. As I said, very thin line between anarchy and freedom. It should be a very free market. It should be a very free space, but it should be a space that would be still overseen, allowing for equal application of the rules of the game, and then all the players will have equal chance.
I mean, it's often been dubbed here in Davos saying the blockchain technology is the moment of 1933, 1993, 1994 in internet terms. But the difference, of course, is it's already very much routinely around. So, but still, it's so much opportunity around, and we are about to learn so much and have to experiment and pivot around, and it could really, of course, immerse like AI in all respects, and that's why it's a very special topic, actually.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to say, but just to be very concise, I'd say that being here in Davos 2018, World Economic Forum, would say that blockchain, it's social dramatic transformation at scale, something that we have never seen. It's not only blockchain, it's a number of exponential technology that can be facilitated from it. It's the internet of money. It's very exciting. It's going to happen no matter what. We can oppose it, we can facilitate it. It's a great opportunity, an entrepreneurial standpoint, on a government standpoint. I think there's going to be, I think next year we'll all be here and we'll be sitting in a very different situation than now. And I think there is a window. It's not going to happen overnight. And there is an opportunity, and I think conversations such as today can unleash to new opportunities. So
thanks. Hakan?
Yeah. Can I? So yeah, there is already like huge amount of jobs within even our projects we're hiring, and I want to take this opportunity to speak to Ukrainian young engineers, cybersecurity experts, that we have a lot of things to do together. And I want to say that there are also niches that are not occupied right now in the finance sphere of blockchain. There are crypto exchanges that currently are playing some dirty games, and they are valued because of the volume. And this is first thing that the regulator have to look at, because sometimes numbers are manipulated. And we as Hacken, we as a community of ethical hackers, we announced that we already set up the team and made the scoring model for the crypto exchanges, and we will provide unbiased rating of them so that people know where and how to trade.
Thanks. Uzlata.
I have three final points which I think I will draw from the conversation that we had. The first one is about innovation. What we're seeing today is amazing pace of innovation, both with Sophia, I think that the great project and OpenAI platform and how it's been driven forward. The blockchain in itself, and not just cryptocurrency, but it's beyond this, it gives a lot of hype and discussion. We didn't talk about IoT because we talked about IoT a few Davoses back. We talk about fourth technology revolution back, but the pace of innovation, that's what excites people, and that's why many of the people came to see Sophia, to take pictures, selfies, whatever. So the attention to innovation gonna continue and progress. So this is first. No matter what the government says, any government says, it's gonna develop. The second topic, it's about regulation and the government interference into the innovation. We will see more discussions, and it's good that the discussion take place in the places like Davos or other meetings and conferences, because it's critical that discussion take place. It's better to have a discussion before the regulation become imposed. And there are countries and the governments and the political leadership that would like to impose a regulation, even in the most developed and democratic countries. So the regulation will be something that will be critical for the discussion of the future innovation. And the final, third topic, is security. Because any innovation and any evil thinking government can use both AI and cryptocurrencies and blockchain and IoT to undermine societies or undermine other countries. And we've been seeing this in Ukraine, and we've been seeing this in US, where the evil minds can use other technologies and other tools to undermine democracy and the principles, and economy in general, including undermining technology and the trust into the technology. That's why three things which we will continue to monitor during Davos, and TechCrunch going to write about this. First, it's innovation, and it's going to continue. Second, the government's role in this and their controversy of different governments' thoughts about this. And finally, security. Security or cybersecurity is also a big topic here today in Davos, and it's going to continue to be big.
Great. Well, we're out of time. I think we're finished with the panel. Thank you so much for everyone contributing and everyone for coming and attending this panel. Thank you very much. Round of applause. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Very good.